Hey, I'm Claire.
And I'm Janice.
And this is The X-Files, a podcast about breakups, broken hearts, and moving on.
We are breakup coaches here to help you beat your breakup,
Heal your broken heart,
and move on to an amazing, abundant life. Hello, and welcome to another solo episode of X-Files. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Janice Formicella, showing up today without my co-host Claire to chat with you about dating and my approach to dating. I'm really thankful that you would put this on and that you are interested in my take on how quickly to move in relationships. But before I get too far, I wanted to mention that Claire and I will be doing a live coaching session in our Facebook group this coming Monday, June 22nd. We love being put on the spot and answering questions from our community. And if you have a question, this is your chance to ask us in the moment. To participate, just request to join our group on Facebook. Breakups, broken hearts, and moving on. Please note that you must answer each of the membership questions for approval. All right, this is a safe place for everyone. We need to know just a little bit about you before we approve. So please be mindful of that. We get a lot of requests that we're not able to approve. So I'm really dedicated to, keeping my commitment to that. So please, it probably takes a minute. All right. So let's get into it. Today, I'm talking about slowing things down in a relationship. In my studies as a breakup and dating coach, this is something I've read a lot about and studied. As a coach, I know for sure that it is something that people struggle to do, especially when there are lingering effects from a breakup. As a human myself, I know how easy it is to get caught up in the excitement of a new connection and want to just run with the feel goods. I've often said on the show that the relationship pattern that I most work to improve is that I love being swept off my feet. This has been the way that I have felt, that I've most felt like the turn on in past relationships. And it's how I've gotten excited about people. And it's also something that I know from experience and from doing this and from studying a lot that can lead to a lot of heartache. So today I'm telling you why you may want to go slow in dating and how to do it. All right. So like I said, I haven't always practiced what I preach. I think this is what makes me a really great coach. I really do have experience kind of all over the place when it comes to dating and relationships. I was really young when I met my ex-husband and moved fairly quickly. We did wait 3 years to get married, but we moved in and merged completely within the first year. Looking back, I probably wouldn't even have thought to do it differently because of how I was raised. I was raised in a very strict Mormon community, and most of the people I knew who were married had gotten engaged and then married within the first 6 months. I am not kidding. I've known people to get engaged after the first month. I've known of one case where a couple got engaged after the first date. It's a cultural thing. So it was super normalized for me. So while we waited to get married, in my mind, at the age that we were, marriage and commitment was something that I wanted and something that I thought we needed, even though we were so young, like college freshmen. And I also saw that those who I knew, those who I had grown up with around me were doing it. And, it was just a desire that I still had because I was so recently out of that community. So yeah, I pushed for a full commitment as soon as I knew that we were somewhat of a match. We were very compatible in a lot of ways. And yeah, I'd probably do things differently if I could. After my divorce, I had another lesson in the importance of taking it slow. I had a whirlwind relationship with someone who seemed to be a dream in the beginning and who turned out to be the most terrifying and abusive person I've actually ever known. And I do not say that lightly. I want you to know that. We moved really fast, and so much so that I just felt really sucked in, and too much so to really walk away by the time I realized that it wasn't a safe situation for me. If I knew what I knew about healthy relationships now, I don't think that he would have even seen me again or spoken to me again after probably the second week that I came in contact with him. All right. And I know that that is like a worst case scenario situation. Okay. So just because my situation was abusive doesn't mean that, if it's not abusive, you should rush. I'm just saying, this has happened to me. I know why it's important. And I also know that there are exceptions. Of course, every relationship is different, every person's different. And I absolutely know of a small handful of, quote, successful couples who have been together a very long time, who went really fast in the beginning, very fast. A couple close friends of mine, I think they hooked up on their first day and they're very happy many years later. I know them well. I also know that these people happen to share the same values, have similar personalities, have had similar goals at the time, were compatible and had lots of chemistry, and that all of these things still exist today. So I also consider them to be exceptions. I do. So I'll stand by my opinion as a coach and a dating podcaster that it's typically better to take things slow. All right. When we come on the podcast, we do need to kind of give, quote, blanket advice. And so this would be one of mine. And it's not just because of my experience. So I've got a few reasons why you might want to take things slow. So number one, I just want to get this out of the way. So I know I'm starting things off on kind of a negative note, but it's because I want to emphasize it while also putting it out there and then moving on. So sometimes, not always, sometimes it can be a red flag for abuse when the person you are dating attempts to push things really quickly. It's dangerous because an abusive person will often appear super romantic and appear to be super into you when in reality, they're attempting to suck you in. They're attempting to see what you're going to allow them to do. I know this better than anyone. I thought my abuser was the most romantic man on earth. Within a couple weeks of meeting, we were talking every day, maybe even within a week or two. And this was at his insistence. He showered me with gifts and trips in the initial months, sweeping me off to Vegas one weekend, last minute. Super fun, super sexy. And he also became really demanding of my time. And I took it for affection, like he just couldn't wait to talk to me again. He asked me to move in before we'd even been together 6 months. And once we were living together, I realized it wasn't the fantasy I thought it was. When things completely fell apart over a year later, I started to do research into domestic violence, which is really interesting because guess what? I was a women's studies major and already had studied a lot on domestic violence. I had worked at shelters, but I wanted to learn about the psychology of the survivor and how I had gotten wrapped up in something that was so dangerous. And I was really amazed at how depressingly textbook my relationship had been, and what a textbook example of an abuser my ex was. I mean, he checked every single box of things to watch for. And I also learned that abusive individuals will often try to move really quickly in dating. They might say things like, "You're the only person who gets me." Have you heard that? "I've never felt this way before," and make a play for a lot of commitment in the early weeks and, initial months. It may be exciting, but it can also be a sign that a person is attempting to exert control over your life, that they are seeing how wide they can stretch your boundaries, that they don't respect that you have a life outside of them, and that they are attempting to experiment with isolating you from your network. Right? I could go on and on about this. It is great to get excited about meeting someone new. I completely still think that to this day, but we are adults. We need to do things in the right way when it comes to relationships. Even if you're super into someone, if they start pushing for a serious relationship early on, it's at least something to look at. I know it doesn't necessarily mean they're abusive, but you need to examine it a bit. All right. You need to maybe see what they think about slowing things down and taking steps to get to know each other more before becoming exclusive. All right. How they respond may tell you exactly what you need to know about whether or not it's a good idea to keep exploring things. If they get angry and say, "Oh, screw you, you must not like me," that's going to tell you a lot. All right. So, 2 reasons to take it slow. You must have time for conflict to make an appearance in the relationship. If you get too invested and then find out what a jerk they can be, it can be harder to walk away. Again, I know this from personal experience. I was amazed at how belittling and degrading my ex could be, or how dismissive he could be when I tried to have very calm conversations with him about how he acted when he was hungover. He's also an alcoholic, and he was a nightmare to be around the next day after he would drink. We had merged our lives together so much by that point that I found it difficult to walk away. I moved really quickly with the last man I dated. I sometimes refer to him as Laundry Boy. And that was because I knew by that time that it was best to take relationships slow. In fact, in my relationships, in the previous years before I got with him, I had taken things really slow. So much so that, the men I dated would complain. But in this case, I kind of had this false sense of security because we had been friends. Like, I'd actually known him for a few years before we became a couple. And so I was, we went from 0 to 60 just, kind of immediately once we kind of discovered that we had this connection. So all that being said, one of the first times we argued, he started mimicking my facial expressions as I was trying to talk to him about the conflict, about the disagreement. I was shocked. And I really wish I would have known how nasty he could be before I went to stay with him in London for an entire month. So some people are completely lovely when there's no conflict to deal with. But conflict can be extremely threatening to some people. Those who desire healthy relationships and are able to be self-reflective can learn over time how to handle conflicts in a mature way. Sure, it doesn't necessarily bring out the best in everyone. It's not something that we want, but you can learn how to cope with it in ways that don't make it worse, in ways that don't unnecessarily hurt the other person. But for others, it brings out their absolute worst side, and they may feel as though they will sacrifice too much to learn about their patterns or unproductive communication. You need to know this about someone. Write this down. When someone shows you a side of themselves that you don't like, that is their side. That is the person you will have to live with if you move forward. That is what you will be coping with when there are disagreements. Not everyone is a complete jerk when they are uncomfortable because of conflict. I know this for a fact. Some people are. And how do you know? By experiencing it. This is not likely to happen in the initial weeks or even months of a relationship. And why is that? This brings me to point number 3, the ever-present honeymoon phase of a relationship. You know how Claire and I love to make sure that people are aware of the honeymoon phase. That's because awareness of this relationship dynamic can prevent a lot of heartache down the line. So I know that we have new listeners all the time. I bet we've got a bunch listening. So let me provide a little refresher here. The honeymoon phase is the initial phase of a relationship when both people are putting on their best. It happens after it becomes clear how much chemistry a couple has. And then they kind of decide to, quote, move forward, explore things. Each is trying to impress the other. Things are happy and fun. Everyone's excited about the connection. It feels great. There are tons of happy hormones flowing due to the physical attraction and probably the amount of sex that a new couple has. Both people are happy and hopeful about the future. This is the honeymoon phase. Every relationship goes through it. Unfortunately, many couples will find a really beautiful groove and stay together once it ends. But the honeymoon period always comes to an end, and then it becomes kind of more of navigating life together in the actual reality of life. Counselors and experts agree that the honeymoon phase can last for a few months, but somewhere between like a few months and up to 2 years. I know this can probably be a bit frustrating, if you're trying to make a decision about a relationship. Do I have to wait 2 years? Well, I'm not necessarily saying you have to wait 2 years to make a decision, but it's probably a good idea to wait for some real life shit to start happening in your lives before, deciding to move in together, before deciding that you can't live without them, merging your lives, getting married, that sort of thing. Because what happens? After a year, you may have a family emergency, and then you notice for the first time that the other person isn't really all that helpful or supportive. I've heard of this. That's, not something that you want to live with forever. Or one of you may lose a job and the other person can't handle the stress, or the one who loses their job just, has a meltdown. You may have changes to your schedule and see that alone causes a divide. Things may be all fine and dandy when you're just each working part-time or each 9 to 5, but if that changes, you might not be able to hold it together. Overall, you may also find that the little things that you looked past before during the honeymoon phase are now huge issues that you find quite annoying. It is in this stage of the relationship that you discover and choose how much you want to work through and how much of this you don't. And if you haven't fully merged your lives yet, it can be much, much easier to make the calls that you need to make about the relationship. Even if taking it slow is, just kind of a mental thing for you, and you realize that it's still a young relationship a year in. Number 4, getting caught up in the moment can be a really dangerous thing. It's exciting, yeah, but not necessarily the makings of a healthy, long-lasting relationship. Many relationships that move fast are built on lust and fantasy. They're with two people who have a lot of physical chemistry. They're moving quickly because both parties are idealizing each other and the future they could have together. Fantasy is not a good foundation for a relationship. People are never, ever the idealized version we have in our minds of them. Never. Life is never a fantasy, especially when it comes to the life that two people build together in the real world. Even if a person isn't, abusive, like my situation, it's possible that they might be presenting themselves in a way that's not representative of how they, quote, really are. So you probably know the sentiment. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Taking things slow will help you see which part of the fairy tale you can expect to have in the relationship and which parts you can't. Above all, it is important to take things slow in relationships because you deserve to have a beautiful relationship that ticks most of your boxes. Do you even have boxes? You should. Because you deserve to have someone that you have, amazing chemistry with, but that you also have amazing compatibility with. Please head over to episode 35, where Claire and I discuss the differences between chemistry and compatibility and how important it is to have both in your relationship. Before you start dating again, it is important that you are really clear with yourself on what you want out of your dating experience and out of your relationships. You need to look at your needs, wants, and desires. You need to know what your deal breakers are. You need to be clear on your preferences for pretty much every aspect of how you live and how the other person lives. This can range from table manners to whether or not a person has or wants kids or has kids. That could be one as well. The more clear you are before you start out, the more satisfied you will be with your experience and the more likely you will get what you want. And the more clear you are, or the clearer you are, I don't know. I'm going to say the more clear you are. Sorry. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. The longer your list will be, and the more time you will need to see if this person checks the boxes. You know what? This can be a fun part of dating too. So, it's not all about having a significant other. This can be a journey to enjoy. Some compatibility issues don't show up until you've gotten to know someone for several months, maybe a year, and again, maybe till the end of the honeymoon phase. So keeping things flexible can really help you create confidence in a relationship because you can mentally go through and think about your boxes and know whether or not this person is ticking them, whether or not the way that you two operate is ticking them. It also helps us see things for what they are and have perspective when sex and connection begin to cloud our judgment with a new person. This absolutely happens. It's hard to admit, but it does happen. Well, I've made my case for why it is prudent to take a relationship slow. But how do you do it? I know that this is tricky. I work with people on this kind of a lot. I've been asked this a lot even recently. Does it just mean dating and sleeping with a bunch of people and seeing what happens? Does it mean not allowing yourself to have feelings? Does it mean just not moving in together too soon? Does that all mean that I'm taking it slow? I think, like I said before, that you can really enjoy dating and enjoy the new relationship while also protecting your heart and your life. All right. That's something to keep in mind, is that this is not just making sure that you don't end up with a broken heart. A relationship that goes sour, if you get too enmeshed with one another, it can fuck up your life. I know I'm being really dramatic, but it's true. All right. That's why you need to be mindful. Here are some of the tips I work with my coaching clients on when attempting to take things slow in dating. Number 1, space out the dates. This may seem so obvious, but think about it. How many times have you been really into someone, or the other way around, and dates went from one to multiple times a week in less than a month? There's really nothing wrong with seeing someone new just every few weeks. And I'd say once a week at the most. All right, let the anticipation build. Let yourself continue with your life and the other person do the same. Respect one another's outside worlds. Meet other people and make an informed decision. Don't just run with the first person you feel a connection with. Oh, and yeah, I wanted to say this also means not spending, days on end with a person in the very beginning. I know I've done it. I've known so many people who, have had that great first or second date and then spent the entire weekend together. I don't know. I would say not to make it a habit in the early days. Number 2, this is tricky, but I want to put it out there. Space out the communication. And listen, this isn't about playing it cool or playing games. This is a common sense dating tactic to make sure that you don't get too connected before you've gotten a chance to know someone. Do not operate as though you and this other person are obligated to stay in touch after only a few dates, and certainly not before a few dates. No. I have mentioned before on this show that one of the biggest ways to turn me off in a dating situation is to text me the next morning after a first date and ask me how I slept or how I am. This is because of the obligation factor when I barely know someone. I think, why are they texting me, as one of the first things they do in the morning? And also, like, this is what a couple would do. This is something that your partner would do in the morning, asking you how you are, not someone you've just gone on one date with. To me, that's moving too fast. All right. However, I have had more than one female friend say that they would actually be flattered if someone did this and might like the first date morning after text. So my response is that just because you like it still doesn't mean that you should be doing it. As a guideline, I think it's a bad move. I'm not saying play games. I'm saying that you really have no reason to do check-ins and speak constantly with a person you are just barely getting to know. Number 3, don't get carried away with the fantasizing. Early love and attraction. Oh, I know how good it feels. Feels amazing to enjoy being in someone's arms and picturing the future. Like, after all, isn't that why we're dating in the first place? Doesn't it feel so good to connect with someone and then start thinking that everything you've always wanted is right in front of you? Or to get excited about the amazing things you will do together? Yep, it sure does feel good. It can have some kind of addictive qualities. And it's important to recognize when this is happening and then use that as a sign to kind of just step back, take a look at things, and not get too wrapped up in all of the daydreaming. When we start to create a future with someone, we also start to form expectations as to how they will fulfill their role in the scenario. We begin to idolize the person. We can very quickly begin to lose sight of reality. And sometimes this can show up in negative ways as we are courting and dating. And it could definitely cause us to move more quickly than we should. So I had a experience with this a few years ago. I was dating a really, really lovely and magnetic man who I loved spending time with. Just being around him felt great. Amazing physical chemistry. I actually was the one who kissed him the first time. And in the initial 2 or 3 weeks of dating / being together, I was home one night on what was meant to kind of be a night off for me. I rarely did that at the time, but I kind of had this urge to, kind of veg out and watch some TV one night, and I wasn't planning on seeing him. He knew all of this. So at one point he texts and said he wanted to stop by to, as he put it, tuck me in and say goodnight. Now, I resisted this. I wasn't planning on seeing anyone. And he actually gave me a really hard time. He actually said that he felt like he should be able to do that. So I laughed it off, despite being, a little put off, to be honest. And not even 2 weeks later, we're planning on hanging out one Saturday night after I had spent the day with some friends on an outing that was quite important to me, like something that we had planned for a couple months. So at one point during the day, he started texting and just like asking a bunch of questions about where I was, when I was going to be there, what we were going to do. I mean, we had kind of a loose plan of that he was going to rock up when I got home. So, it was lunchtime and I was with a bunch of people. And so, I answered some texts, which I really didn't want to do, to be honest. And I said that I would just need to get back to him a little later. I think I might have even said like when we stopped for lunch or when we were on our way back. So, and again, he gave me a really hard time. And he was, I remember he was really critical of my ability to, quote, woo a man. So this didn't go over very well with me. And I wasn't as forgiving as the first time around. And I just completely canceled our plans. I said, like, I don't want to hang out with you at all tonight. I'm not necessarily saying that was the best move on my part, but, that's what I did. So we did meet in person the next day, and I let him know how, that had made me felt, that it was supposed to be a special day for me, that, I didn't want to be sitting there and texting with, 5 or 6 other people that I was trying to enjoy my time with. And you know what? He admitted that he had gotten way too caught up in the fantasy of what he wanted to go on between us, and that it had caused him to get over anxious. He said he had been thinking about getting a place together, having kids, and that he had kind of lost touch with reality. This was probably a month in, all right? So keep perspective. Relationships are meant to marinate. If the connection is as strong as you think it might be, it's worth giving it time. The connection will grow, and you don't have to make it happen all now. Number 4, do different things together. This is also a tip that Claire and I gave on episode 35 about chemistry and compatibility. If you are really feeling it with someone, rather than getting into the habit of going out to eat together every Friday night, or, getting into the habit of, hanging out at your place all the time because that feels good and you both enjoy it, take the message that you're feeling it with someone and then move into thinking about different things you can do with this person, new things you can do with this person. Not only will this help you space out the dates, you got to plan stuff, right? It will also help you to see that this is a match before you get too carried away with trying to push the relationship before you really know them. So plan dates during the day. Go to different parts of town, do something that's new for both of you. Go to a wine tasting on a Friday afternoon, and then next weekend, see live music on Saturday evening. Mix it up, baby. Get an actual feel for the person. So I will say for me, I guess this would be something even that I would consider a stretch, because you know what? I love going out to eat. I love going to fancy bars. I would be happy to just do that all the time with my friends and lovers. But I also know that these are, fairly flattering scenarios for a lot of people. So if I was serious with someone, I would, try and kind of step outside my comfort zone, mix other things in there with it. All right. Number 5, ways to take it slow. Wait to have sex. Oh boy, this is a tricky one for me to even talk about because there's just no black and white rule for this. And also, I love sex. I think that sex is very important when it comes to dating and getting to know someone. So I'm not saying, hold off too long or wait 3 months, wait 1 month, 3 dates. I'm just saying to think it through. If it's someone that you really like, perhaps wait until you can have a discussion about what it means rather than, rushing into it on the first or second date because you're, feeling it and you're tipsy and you know what I'm saying. Perhaps wait until you know that you are able to have a sexual experience with someone without it clouding your judgment, or wait until you are able to separate sex from the fantasy of a future with this person. Sex can cloud our judgment. It can help to create expectations out of the other person, and it can bond us with someone before we're really ready. So just be intentional about it. When you do have sex, be honest with yourself about the fact that it's still early days, and it does not necessarily mean you need to fuse with this person or move things from casual to committed. enjoy it for what it is, basically. Number 6, ways to actually take things slow in relationships and dating. Ooh, people, it's tough love time. My final rule is to be an adult and face reality. All right, no haters, please. Relationships are not fairy tales. Even the healthiest relationships take work, and all couples have struggles of one kind or another. People are flawed. Someone who you may have an amazing physical connection with may end up having some life complications that you don't want or need in your life. Dating is meant to be fun. And regardless of how, quote, right it feels, it is still a choice to move forward. Having self-control will not only serve you well in dating, it will probably make you a stronger person overall. So keep perspective. Allow yourself to explore things with multiple people. Allow yourself to see red flags or simply things that don't align with what you want. Okay? Not everything has to be this glaring red flag or a sign that someone is toxic. It could just not be the match that you desire. Allow yourself to put on the brakes when you feel excited, and also when you start to see that maybe as excited as you were, the relationship just isn't the ideal one for you. I know that some of this can kind of suck to hear after a breakup or once you're starting to date again. Yeah, I do get that. I hear it a lot. A lot of people want to repair their hearts by enjoying being in the arms of someone new and don't want to hear that taking it slow may be best. A lot of people are feeling disappointment after a breakup because they really want a relationship in their life. So, you might be listening to this podcast on breakups and, broken hearts and moving on. And, now I'm saying to go slow. I get that. And it's really easy to ignore suggestions like mine when you really long for companionship. So, use what I've said as guidelines for your dating life. Try it out, experiment with some things, and above all, just please make sure that you put yourself and your future first. All right. I would really love to hear from you. I appreciate you so, so much for tuning in. If you liked my take, find me on Instagram at Janice Formicella, spelling in the show notes, and let me know what you think. If you are interested in getting out there and starting to date again, or looking to up your dating game or date with more intention, my coaching calendar does currently have openings for dating coaching. I would be so thrilled to support you on your romantic journey, honestly. All right, thank you once again, and I will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks for listening to X-Files, a podcast about breakups, broken hearts, and moving on.
If you liked this episode, tag us on your Instagram story so we can connect with you.
And you can find me, Claire, on Instagram at Claire Lofthouse.
And me, Janice, on Instagram at Janice Formicella. If you'd like to join our online community, find us on Facebook at Breakups, Broken Hearts, and Moving On.
And here's a preview of our next episode.
Yeah. So the chemistry is there, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be, talking with the person all night and, physically attracted to them. But, as we've talked about many times on the show, including in an actual episode that everyone loved, that's only one side of what makes a relationship work. It's an important side, but,
it's just one side. Yeah. I mean, you don't really know what someone's like until you're like part of their work week, and you're like trying to see each other, during normal times instead of like always being one of you is on vacation when you see each other,
Yep,
basically.
yep. Very good point and very true.